Kevin, such an honor to meet you.
Very nice
Welcome
to meet you.
Moscow.
Thank you.
I found the movie absolutely gripping, fascinating, dramatic and tense. So congratulations.
Thank you very much.
You wanted to make this movie for a very long time.
Yes.
So what took it so long?
Well, oh, okay. Well, I had the idea to make a submarine movie a long time ago because I liked the idea of a movie which is set in this very alien world. It's a bit like being in a spaceship, being in a submarine. You know, you're cut off from the world, even though you're so close to it. Really, you're cut off from where human beings should be. Human beings shouldn't be deep down in the sea. If we were meant to be there, we'd be fish. You know, we're not meant to be there. So something about that environment, I really thought would make an interesting drama, and it just took me a long time to find what the story should be. And I was lucky enough to come across a very good writer, Dennis Kelly, who worked with me on the screenplay, and we came up with this story together. And he was really the one who said, because the inspiration of this film was partly because of what happened in the terrible Kursk disaster in 2000, people stuck on the bottom of the sea in a submarine. And so he was the one who said, well, we should keep it with a Russian theme, so let's have some Russian characters in this film.
And how was it working with an international team of actors?
You know, I really loved working with an international team of actors because they each bring something slightly different, and they keep you never quite certain where you are. You don't come into work and go, I know what this person's going to do, I know it. I was never quite certain how people were going to behave, particularly the Russian actors, who have a very different approach to performance, very psychological approach to performance. And so that keeps the film very alive, it keeps the set very alive, because there's uncertainty and spontaneity, and that's really good. It was very exhausting for me because I was having to constantly switch between, you know, talking through the translator to talking myself, understanding different approaches to performance all the time.
And can you tell a bit more about the difference you felt between British actors and Russian actors? Was language a barrier, and how did you enjoy working with our actors particularly?
I didn't find the language was as much of a barrier as I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be really difficult, but actually when you get used to understanding how a person behaves, they can do an awful lot just by sign language or just by showing you something. And I was particularly impressed by the Russian actors in the way that they brought intense psychological study of their character. Even in the smallest moments, they would think about what would my character really do here? How would he dress? How would he move his body? How would he say this line? Why is he saying this line? They want to think about it very much. They're quite intellectual about it. And sometimes I would be cursing. I would say, just act, just act, stop talking about it. But I think the consequence of the deep thinking of psychology means that I think the Russian style of cinema acting is really very strong, very strong. And I think one of the pleasures for a lot of audience in Britain and in America with watching this movie is seeing all these great Russian actors who they've never seen before, and they're wonderful different faces and different acting style, and it's so refreshing. It's a very original, makes the film feel very original.
And is it true that you had doubts about Jude Law, that he would really match the role of a captain after being a Latin lover for so long?
Well, I didn't have doubts. It took me a long time to think. It took me a while to be convinced myself that he was the right person, because his reputation as an actor is, of course, that he's a matinee idol, that he's a romantic comedy lead, he's this kind of person. But in this film, he has to do something very different. He has to be a real man. He has to be tough and strong and massive, and he has to be a leader of all of these guys. You know, people like Puskapalis. He's a big man, and you have to feel that Jude can command them. So, yeah, it's a very different role for Jude, and I think people will come away from this film thinking, "Wow, I've never seen Jude Law like this before. This is really." This is really different, but I think he gives a brilliant performance. I think it's almost unrecognizable, but a very brilliant performance.
and they had a chance to talk to real submariners. Can you tell a bit more about the shooting process? Because it's very interesting, as it is evident that it is an extremely hard film to shoot.
Well, we filmed part of the movie on a real Russian submarine that is strangely a collector had bought and brought to England about 20 years ago. And so it's sitting in a river outside London, and we filmed inside that submarine for a couple of weeks. And that was the first thing we did, so that all the actors could experience what it's really like to be in a submarine, the claustrophobia, the fact that you're in this metal world, you know, in a tube of metal. And then we moved into the set on in the studio, which is much easier, but of course the actors brought with them the understanding, the knowledge of what it's really like in one of those, in a submarine, because they had experienced it for 2 weeks. And we had a week of rehearsal before we started shooting, where we had the submarine experts, British submarine experts, came and gave us lessons in submarine. So they would tell each actor, well, you're in charge of the electric engines. This is what you're doing. This is why you're doing it. You're doing the navigation. So this is how you do the navigation. And this is what. So they helped the actors understand what their role on board the boat was.
So you didn't actually go to Sevastopol?
I did go to Sevastopol, yes. I went to Sevastopol, and there's a few shots in the film in Sevastopol. I went there and I filmed a little bit, but I was at one stage going to film more there, but we couldn't get the insurance to go. And then, of course, everything changed. So in a way, this film now is a little bit of history, because since we made the film until now, obviously Sevastopol has now no longer got Ukrainian Navy there. In this film, there's a Ukrainian admiral who's corrupt and who they bribed to get the submarine. Of course, there is no such thing as a Ukrainian admiral in Sevastopol now, so history has taken over.
Would you go on such a trip yourself, and what would you do with the money?
I would have to be really desperate to go on this trip, but I think these men are quite desperate. They're desperate to prove that they can be men again, that they can be successful, because the world is judging them. Your failures because you don't have money, and they want to be successful. They want to have respect for themselves and from other people. So maybe if I was like them, maybe I would go on a trip like this. But at the moment, no, I wouldn't do a trip like this. Far too dangerous. Being in a submarine is frightening. It's frightening. And some people have said to me, you know, that it's one of the worst deaths they can possibly imagine, is dying in a submarine with water coming in. It's one of the most horrible ways to die that you can imagine.
And you went to St. Petersburg inspired by Kursk, and you visited shipbuilding museums and schools. How did you find it?
Well, I went to. I didn't go to St. Petersburg.
You didn't?
I went to Sevastopol.
And during the stay in Moscow, premiering in Russia, you didn't?
Oh, I went to St. Petersburg yesterday.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about.
Oh, I thought you meant before.
No.
Yes. No, I was in St. Petersburg yesterday, showing the film there, and it's a beautiful city. I'd never been there before. I'd only ever been to Moscow. And funnily, my wife's family are originally from St. Petersburg, so we went to see some places that associated with her family. So it was very nice for her as well.
And the last questions. What have you seen so far in Moscow, and how, I've heard that you had a massive culinary program.
A massive culinary program. No, what have I done in Moscow? Not very much. I've done all the obvious sites. I've been to the Kremlin, I've been to the Kremlin Museum, I've been to some of the art galleries, this sort of thing. I once went to Star City. I went there before. It's just very interesting. And it's an amazing city. I love the city. It's a totally different flavor than anywhere else in the world that I've been to, and I do like Russian food too. I like borscht, and I like blini. So I'm enjoying that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes.